Hello everybody and welcome back to the video. I'm your host Oti, and today, as it's Doctor Who's anniversary, I thought I'd say what Doctor Who means to me and how it can't be saved. In fact, it has no way of being saved whatsoever. So Doctor Who used to be the show that is a staple of British culture. You know, everyone around the world, or in nearly every country, knows what Doctor Who is. And they associate it with Britain. It reimagined what a police box was, because before it was the TARDIS, it was where you could ring the police. To so many people, Doctor Who is their world. It's been an integral part of their lives. It's got them through difficult times. It's given them joy when they needed it. It's given them sadness when they least expected it. It used to be clever, weird, wonderful, exciting, intergalactic. There are no words that can define Doctor Who, but an image that can definitely define it is Tom Baker. You know, it's had so many fans over several generations, and I'd say arguably it's for every generation. That's what makes it a family show. You know, it was a show that families used to enjoy. Whenever it was tea time, people would tune in to watch whichever Doctor was on and whatever monster that he was going to face, and hide behind the sofa at the sight of Daleks, Cybermen, Yetis, Sontarans, Sil, Vervoids, anything that would make them scared. The Doctor used to be the hero that everyone loved, and they knew that it was going to be alright because there was plenty more to come, and they knew that it wasn't going to end anytime soon, and that it will be back for the following year. Up until 1989. And then once it returned in 2005, a new generation of fans would go on to appreciate it. You know, speak to anyone in my generation and they will remember Matt Smith, David Tennant, Christopher Eccleston, and they will tell you how good it was back then. Among the words I would use to describe Doctor Who is weird, clever and wonderful, which are some of the words that I used just now. But later on, I knew that it was going to wear off when they cast Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor. Now, I did give this a chance, but it didn't feel the same anymore. And in fact, I could see some of the echoes of what was to come in Capaldi's later run. And I used to herald the 12th Doctor as a hero. You know, his speech in Flatline is something that I will always remember fondly. This, to me, was the moment when I thought I want to be like the Doctor. I also thought this a lot during the Matt Smith era, and when I watched the classic episodes of Doctor Who when it was a part of an exclusive Virgin Media on-demand celebration where it showed some of the classic episodes, and it reignited my love for the show. And to me, Doctor Who would be one of the biggest things in my teenage years. You know, my teenage years were very different to a lot of other people. But the moment when it all changed for me is when they cast Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor. Now, a part of me knew this was going to happen because it was during the Wimbledon's Women's final, which I know how these things work. I knew how rigged it was going to be. And then from that moment onward, I started to doubt it. I thought about giving her a chance, but when I watched it, it just didn't feel the same. Jodie didn't feel like the Doctor because they'd cast her wrong. Everything about the Jodie Whittaker era was wrong. there wasn't a single episode that I enjoyed other than the one with Captain Jack Harkness in. But still, that was a rip-off of Blood of the Daleks. And don't even get me started on how half of that era blatantly copied Big Finish stories, because the episode with Mary Shelley had the exact same historical figure near the exact same location, fighting the exact same monster where she'd met the Eighth Doctor years earlier, and then went off travelling with the Eighth Doctor. This just ruined that story, and it made no sense. The other thing is that in the Christmas or New Year's special with the Dalek Civil War thingy, they've already done that, in Blood of the Daleks. Exact same plot, new breed of Daleks being created, and then it ending in a standoff and civil war. It just... They were stealing from Big Finish. And then we all know how shit The Timeless Children was, but even then, Joe Martin's Doctor broke canon because William Hartnell was the first Doctor. And then afterwards, with Phasmin, the shippers are just stupid and delusional. Like, Doctor Who is not a romance show. I know that the Doctor did have feelings for Rose Tyler, and of course there is River Song, but other than that, I think the Doctor and his companion should just be platonic, and the shippers just ruin everything they touch. Look at The Next Step. That nearly all of their fans want it to be, let's ship this character with this character. It's the same with Disney Star Wars as well. And then when Russell T Davies announced he was returning, I too was slightly hopeful, but I knew that deep inside it won't fix the Jodie era and all the Timeless Children. It won't erase it from existence. And when he did return, I thought, okay, I was a bit hopeful, and that David Tennant and Catherine Tate were returning. But then, during Ncuti Gatwa's interview, the second one, I lost hope altogether. I was just like, yeah, this is doomed. So... And then, of course, we all know what happened with the Timeless Children. We don't need to go around that road. When the time did come to see David Tennant return, I immediately knew that this was going to be nostalgia baiting to bring back all the fans of my generation and perhaps a few of the ladies who adore David Tennant as an actor. And I get that because... Tennant is in a league of his own, and he made Doctor Who truly what it was when he took up the reins from Eccleston. And then from those years onwards until 2010, he guided Doctor Who into its peak. He was the face of the show, and there are still aspects of the 10th Doctor that I respect. A scene that stands out for me is when he hesitates to kill the General in the Doctor's daughter. Donna and Martha think that he's going to do it, but he puts down the weapon and said that he wouldn't. And then he just says what's going to happen, because that is the Doctor that we all knew and loved. First of all, the Star Beast was already a comic, and I believe an audio. And they ruined Donna Noble by changing the Dr. Donna. That was in place because it had to be. And, if Donna remembered the Doctor, she would have died. But they decided to change that because... it's Russell T Davies, and then he made it full on a party political broadcast on behalf of Slaanesh. And then when the time came for Ncuti Gatwa to be the Doctor, Ncuti Gatwa should have been more masculine. You know, the Doctor should be masculine. That's the way it should be. And he cried in nearly every episode, which made no sense whatsoever. Now, when the Doctor has cried in the past or gotten emotional, it's with good reason. I.e. when Lucy Miller died at the end of To the Death, and once it transitions into Dark Eyes, the Doctor loses it and spirals, going to the end of the universe, or attempting to do so, to see how it all turned out. And when the 11th Doctor cried, it was when he saw his two best friends, Amy and Rory, vanish and get taken away from him by a weeping angel. But when it happens every episode, it just gets boring and unwatchable. And then let's not forget the constant political lectures that we get throughout the course of both of the series. By the time it got to the second series of Ncuti, I just got so angry, because this isn't the Doctor Who that I knew and loved when I was young. Well, I'm still young, but you know what I mean. It's not the Doctor Who that I used to look up to. To me, Doctor Who has always been a family programme, and half of the stuff that we saw in the Ncuti Gatwa era were inappropriate for any generation. I felt betrayed. I was raging inside. If they can't do it, we can. I think that the fans are the only thing that the show has left. The true fans, the fans who adored the classic era, who like the 2005 to 2017 revival. You know, those who've seen what the show's become. And it just, not even Disney want to keep it because it was that bad. You know, they constantly ruin classic villains. They changed canon all too much. They ruined the exact point of regeneration. And that's why I decided to start making my own stop motions. So if you don't know, 2 years ago, I made a stop motion film. And this was done over the course of a year, simply titled Gallifrey Falls. Now, this was set in an alternative version of the Time War where, you know, things were different, where Earth was destroyed, and I was the Doctor. So the only thing I felt that I could do about it was write my own stories, because I've done plenty of that, and now I felt that it was time to try and make something better. And then I'm currently in the middle of making an 8th Doctor multimedia project, which first will be a stop motion, and then will be a series of novels, which I've written myself. I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm actually going to give you a bit of an update on it now. So for fun, I decided to do another photo shoot with the companion, Hakuri. Now, I have changed my mind about where it's going to be published, and it's going to be published on Wattpad.com. Now, this is a fanfiction website that people use, but I want to do it there. And then, as you can see on your screen now, some shots from the photo shoot. My favourite one is of a back shot of Hakuri. I wanted to do that, you know, to channel her inner Japanese city pop singer. I wanted her to look very glamorous, very ladylike, and I, for one, can't wait to get it done and for it to be there for you guys. But hence why I don't think that it can be saved. I don't think it can be saved because I'm very pessimistic about the future. Even if they bring back Billie Piper and Paul McGann, it's not gonna erase, you know, the Jodie, the Ncuti, the David Tennant Return trilogy. You know, it doesn't wipe that from our minds. And then there's the War Between the Land and the Sea, which just has a load of recycled actors and is going to be one big climate change lecture, which we're all bored of, quite frankly. And they've changed the Sea Devils to a name that doesn't suit them at all, and they're remastering a classic story to change history like it's 1984. You know, we're not going to forget that they happened. So that's why I think that it's best that if the fans completely forget about everything that happened after Capaldi, and we look back on classic Doctor Who and the revival of it, Virgin New Adventures, comics, Big Finish, to let the legacy of the show live on, the show that we used to love. That's the only way it can carry on. You know, think about Star Wars and how we've used the expanded universe to forget about Disney and everything that they've done. You know, nothing will save Star Wars and nothing will save Doctor Who, but we can avenge it. We can let the legacy live on. Now, I've made this point because this stance is inspired by the Gatekeepers Alliance. You could say that they've inspired me to, you know, apply the same rhetoric to Doctor Who. You know, the state of Doctor Who is just as dead as Star Wars at this point. And the best way we can do that is to gatekeep. Gatekeep until Kingdom Come. Because Doctor Who is our show as much as it is everyone else's. And it's our duty that we gatekeep the true lore of Doctor Who. You know, canon is essential, canon matters, and canon is important. It can't be whatever we want it to be. Canon is something that is set and it cannot be changed. No matter what anyone else says, no matter if you try to rename the Sea Devils Homo Aqua, if you try and re-establish regeneration, if you try and ship as many characters as you like, you know, it won't work. It's just fan fiction. It's not canon. I'm sorry that I'm so blunt with you all about this, but it's how I feel. You know, Doctor Who's been on this spiral for years now, and it's time for us to make our own things, and it's time for it to just end. So, yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all later. Ta-ra!